college and universities must offer some answer to the question of human identity, since they must operate with some concept of the human. What Somerville says about professional education, I think, is true of all education. It depends on some particular understanding, even some ideal of the human. In practice, many secular universities often settle for focusing upon setting forth ideals regarding two particular aspects of human identity. Both approaches, however, have their limits. One of these approaches is that we are a bundle of capacities. You are an individual who needs to acquire these certain kinds of tools. Thus, the job of the university in this view is to help you acquire all these tools. You are then responsible for planning and building yourself, your identity, your story, and your purpose in life. Yet there is a problem if we simply focus upon supplying instruction to help students acquire tools for building their lives. Speaking of this kind of limited approach, Arthur Holmes noted, "It does nothing to unify a person or his view of life, and it might well encourage the view that life has no overall meaning at all. It simply creates a connoisseur of the fragments of life. But a jack of all trades is a master of none, a fragmented education." There's little that brings these competencies together into a coherent whole or a beautiful life. As one American scholar has claimed, as a result of the lack of coherence in the curriculum, every course becomes an introductory course. There's no logical progression and coherence in the curriculum, particularly with regard to the question of what it means to be a flourishing human being. If you hope to give someone the best tools for building something, you need to know what they plan to build. In truth, if the university is providing tools for building a self, it really does have some implicit idea of what a well-built self entails. If there's something that holds all these competencies together in America, it is the goal identified by Columbia University's Andrew Delbanco in College What Was It? Or What It Was, Is, and Should Be. He suggests that one of the purposes is that universities should contribute to the students' long-term pursuit of happiness. American students, not surprisingly, reflect this outlook that is implicitly communicated by the university. A recent national survey my colleagues and I asked Gallup polling to undertake for us sought to determine American college students' purposes. We found that the top purpose students identified by over 2,500 students surveyed was to be happy. Unfortunately, the problem with identifying happiness as a unifying purpose, though, is that it does not prove helpful when choosing among competing loves and identities, a core process to figure out the good life. Famous American sociologist Robert Bellah described the problem in this way. If selves are defined by their preferences, but those preferences are arbitrary, then each self constitutes its own moral universe, and there is finally no way to reconcile conflicting claims about what is good in and of itself. After all, our various identities and the competencies we use to enhance them will compete. In building the good life, one must make a decision about which structure to design. Students, however, are not taught how to use the tools they receive to make this decision. They're merely encouraged to gain competencies that will help them choose. Now, there's a second thing beyond competencies that the universities might focus upon, and this is identities. And since capacities do not help us discover who we are, we've turned often to identities to go, okay, we can focus upon this. The university today is often concerned with identity politics. The difficulty, however, is that we must figure out which parts of ourselves are most important in ways beyond simply power. For example, how do we balance what it means to be a good neighbor, a good professional, a good friend, a good man or woman, a good citizen? How do we fit all these identities together and more? How do we fit them together? The most obvious area where attention is given to identities is really the most basic in the universities, and that is our professional selves. And this is understandable. This is one of the identities of two that Derek Bach lists in his book, Our Underachieving Colleges. However, there's more to us than just our professional selves. I was talking in an interview with a student at a faith-based institution once, and he gave this story that's related above how There's the military officer who said when he came home, I want, when I take off the uniform, for there to be something else there. Right? I'm just not my professional self. Hopefully there's something more to me. Well, that more often in the university is the civic self, who you are as a good citizen. If, as the United Nations affirms, we are persons with dignity and rights, what is the source of that dignity and those rights? As Brad Gregory of the University of Notre Dame writes, but if nature is not creation, then there are no creatures, and human beings are just one more species that happen to randomly evolve, no more endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights than is any other bit of energy matter. Then there simply are no rights, just as there are no persons, and no theorizing can conjure them into existence. The intellectual foundations of modernity are failing because its governing metaphysical assumptions, in combination with the findings of the natural sciences, offer no warrant for believing its most basic moral, political, and legal claims. So who are we according to the Christian tradition? The most beautiful reality, although some in the contemporary university will tell us differently, is that we do not define everything about ourselves. God, our Creator, defines who we are. What this means is that theology, the study of God, is the lifeblood of the Christian university. I use the metaphor lifeblood for a reason. The problem with the medieval metaphor of theology as queen of the sciences is that it places theology in a palace, as we've already talked about, tucked away. But if God defines who we are, theology must be the lifeblood that flows through every discipline in the university. It should not be sequestered into one department. After all, it animates and gives life to learning of the whole university. Consequently, the quest to discover who we are in the Christian tradition involves a pilgrimage to discover who we are according to the triune God. And so Jesus is the truth. He is the most beautiful. He is our example of all the virtues of forgiveness, humility, hope, and love. And so, in order to properly go and become fully human in light of the image of God, we must turn to Christ ultimately to be our ultimate model of all of what it means to be fully human. Thank you.